Mattathios sat cross-legged on the floor of the blacksmith's hut. His stomach rumbled, and his fingers grew weary as he worked. He was still struggling to maintain his new diurnal lifestyle, and now that it was getting close to midday, he felt sleep gnawing at the back of his eyes. But he had to keep this ruse up as a sun elf while he was in town, and he needed to repair his armor before heading back out on the path. He was currently picking broken links out of his mail hauberk and hammering rivets into new links, while the townsmith Leofstan forged a few small plates to replace the compromised ones in his brigandine. The wraiths had nasty claws that harnessed void energy that let them slice through metal like paper. They had torn through the brigandine, mail, padded Jack, and into his flesh in three main spots. His left shoulder had been hit when a claw came over his shield. The right side of his body had been pierced as he had lifted his sword up high to deliver a death stroke. And the debilitating wound that should have finished him was when four claws had gone straight through his midsection. Thanks to the blessing of order, though, his body was able to quickly stop from bleeding out. And thanks to his blessing of chaos, he was able to withstand the soul-ripping effects from the Wraith's attack. Though his body and soul were now mended, his armor would take much longer to repair. But such was the life of a Magistrati, and Mattathios was grateful to be alive and excited for what fate held in store for him. Most Magistrati wore a brigandine and mail armor because it was easy to repair. The brigandine is just a lot of small, overlapping plates secured to cloth or leather with rivets, and mail is just a lot of small links riveted together. It takes a skilled blacksmith to do anything meaningful, repair-wise, to a breastplate. Making detailed repairs to intricately crafted suits of plate is something a master must do. But any smith worth his salt can rivet together links or forge small plates. Leostan was even faster than he could have expected. Having spent most of his life making copies of the same farm equipment meant that Leostan could replicate small plates and links with ease and alacrity. Both Mattathios and Leostan agreed that fixing the brigandine was top priority because it would be quicker and it provided better protection generally than the mail. Leostan already had crafted all the plates he needed and was busying himself with fitting them back into the brigandine. Mattathios had already repaired the hole in the right side of the mail and had scoured the mail of all broken links. He also cleaned the rust off by putting the mail in a barrel filled with sand and rolling it for a good couple minutes. It would need to be done again once all the links were fixed and in place, and then the whole thing needed to be oiled. Mattathios thought they would be finished with the work by midday tomorrow, at the least. Aelvig should be back from the hunt this evening, and the festival will be tomorrow. After that, I should be on my way again, Mattathios told the blacksmith. Leostan responded, "With luck, we will finish work tonight. Then tomorrow we can celebrate the coming of spring together. All know that Mighty Soul is more likely to answer our prayers with a sun elf present. Your gifts of healing have already started our yearly cycle of rebirth for Aedalbur. It seems the worst is behind us." Mattathios was glad to be wearing his mask at this moment. It hid his shame, in more ways than one. He hated having to lie to these people about his race, but his old self was the prime reason why most denizens of this land spat in hatred or ran in fear of hearing of the hated night elves. But now he was just ruminating on the past and forgetting the present. It would be an honor to harmonize my prayer with Aedalbur's tomorrow. You have all repaid my service with kindness and gratitude. I have no doubt Sol Invicta will grant you succor. Mattathios said with a smile and a grand hand gesture. Leostan nodded his approval, and both men returned to their work. Mattathios then remembered his kite shield, how it had been torn asunder during his fight with the wraiths. Aelvig said only the boss and a few splintered shards had remained strapped to Mattathios' arm when he found his body. Most infantry shields are made quite cheaply and quickly, with little thought for longevity past the next battle. Finely decorated ones were made to display heraldry or used symbolically, not much in combat. The Magistrati had a different approach. They associated themselves more with their shields than with their weapons. A shield is a sturdy bulwark used to protect a man's life, just as the Magistrati Code calls for all of its order to be a bulwark against evil and to protect the free will of all sentient beings. But unlike armor, shields are an active defense. They must be swung around and used with finesse to achieve their full potential. Not like some static breastplate that just sits there waiting to be hit. And so a magistrati must ever be in motion, actively positioning themselves to be just where they are needed most. This symbolic tie is a core tenet of their belief, just as the shield is a core tenet of their fighting style. The magistrati seek balance in all things, so just as the shield protects, it must also attack. The magistrati shields always came to a pointed end, and that end was covered in spell steel. The central boss of the shield was also made of spell steel. Both of these were used to bash into an enemy, and also allowed the magistrati to channel their magics in and out of that spell steel. But the spell steel is costly and time consuming to make, so is used sparingly, and a few key plates in his brigandine and a few key links in his mail were also made of this spell steel, as well as the back edge of his sword. These were all integral parts of the magical protection and spell enhancement that a magistrati relied on. To this end, Mattathios knew that he would have to venture back to the forbidden part of the forest to retrieve the spell steel of his broken shield. Right back into the claws of my would-be slayers. I should seek out that Driadie once I leave, he thought. Mattathios then looked around the blacksmith shop once again, hoping to find something he had not seen before. Alas, he did not. Just the same collection of farming tools and a few spearheads and arrowheads. There was a small collection of shields, though each was more pathetic than the last. The old wood was warped and chipped on all of them. Two were plain wood, while the others had a bit of their cloth covering at least. He held up the best of the bunch and turned to Leofstan. How much for this, my good man? Leofstan shook his head and said, It's yours if you wish. I could not sell it in such a state. The shield has got me through my last battle many years ago, though, so I would be glad to be rid of such a trophy. Mattathios responded, Ah, so it's a symbol of your survival. I shall wield it with honor then, and hope it brings me similar luck. Leofstan was about to reply when a shrill scream cut through the air. Mattathios strapped the shield to his arm and raced to his work area to grab his sword. Leofstan spat and charged headlong out the door of his shop, gripping his blacksmith's hammer tightly. As soon as they made it outside, they saw a line of 4 horsemen standing in the center of Aedalbur. One had a composite-style bow, 2 had spears, and 1 had a shield and sword. Before them lay a dead villager, an arrow protruding from his neck, and a pool of blood spreading beneath him. The horseman with the sword yelled, I will ask again, where's the one you call Aelvig? How many more of your sorry little lives is he worth? Mattathios wore his padded jacket and no pants. He wore his padded jacket and pants, but had no armor. But he had all he needed to deal with brigands like this. He stepped forward and said, You come with threats on your lips and murder in your heart. I was once like you, so I will give you a warning. If you do not choose to leave now, peacefully, I will make sure you never harm another soul. The man with the sword had his horse take a few steps forward, and he aimed the tip of his blade at Mattathios' face. Ah, I see the fool of an elf was too dim-witted to leave town. Do you all know you've been harboring a wretched night elf? At this point, all the residents of Aedalbur were out in the streets or watching from their homes, and many gasped and exchanged glances. Then, a village elder stepped forward. He was a graybeard, but still stood straight as an arrow, and showed no fear. I am Leofric, leader of this village. You come here demanding my son, you kill our town butcher, and then you say we conspire with demons. I say you all die, here and now. The swordsman spit on the ground and spurred his horse into a full gallop towards Leofric. At that second, a dazzling flash of light exploded across the village, and a roaring presence thundered, Witness the harbinger of your annihilation. In that second, the charging horse lost its footing and hit the floor hard, throwing the swordsman into the dirt a few yards ahead. The other three horses all spooked in terror. One reared up and dumped its rider off its back. The other two almost tripped over themselves trying to turn and race away. All the residents of Aedalbur also ran for cover. Monteithio stood in the middle of the pathway, his mask now radiant, with the four faces pulsating brightly, even in the midday sun. He strode over to the fallen swordsman, who lay motionless in the dirt. Monteithio kicked him over and saw his neck was broken and his face a ruin. He then turned and made his way to the spearman, whose horse had bucked him off. The spearman had gotten to his feet and was reaching to grab his spear that was on the floor a few feet to his left. Mattathios dropped his sword and started a slow jog towards the spearman. As he got close, he baited a thrust from the spearman, stepped aside, and grabbed the haft of the spear, and then ran his right hand along the edge of along the shaft and bashed the rim of the shield straight into the spearman's face. The man spurted blood from his mouth and dropped hard to the earth. As he tried to recover, he reached for his dagger, but Mattathios stepped on his arm, pinning it to the ground. Once the spearman made eye contact, his mask flared, and again he yelled, "Yield or die!" The spearman froze with terror, and then slowly removed his hand from his dagger and laid his head on the ground. You made the right choice, brother. Whatever orders sent you here are not worth your life, Mattathios said in a calm voice. As the lights of his mask dissipated, he stepped backwards. He offered his hand to help the spearman rise and asked, "What is your name?" The spearman reached out and clasped his hand firmly and started to rise. But as he did, he drew his dagger and yelled, thrusting the blade at Mattathios' stomach. The elf brought the shield in front of him quickly, breaking the attacker's wrist in the process and making the dagger fall harmlessly to the floor. Mattathios then bashed the shield boss into the attacker's head. He had intended it to be just a dazing blow, but the spearman hit his head hard on a rock as he fell and started convulsing, spitting up blood from his shattered nose and broken jaw. Leofric, the village's leader, approached Mattathios from behind. "Seems you're more than just a healer," he said with a twinge of fear in his normally commanding voice. "Why were they looking for my son? What did you two do?" Mattathios had gone to one knee and had his hand on the spearman's head, trying to see if his wound was able to be healed, but all he felt was the man's soul losing its grip on its mortal shell. He whispered the Magistrati's post-battle litany: coexistence, conflict, combat, devastation, regeneration, transformation. Sadly, this was the best I could do for you. He then stood and turned to face Leofric. Your son found me mostly dead after an encounter in the forbidden part of your forest. Aside from that, I have no clue who these men are or what they want with your son. The Forbidden Zone? What in the name of soul would bring you there? And why would my son be fool enough to travel there and not tell me? Leofric was turning red in the face and trembling slightly, appearing equal parts angry and afraid. Questions best left for another time. We must prepare for those men to return, said Mattathios firmly. Prepare with what? Yelled Leofric. You've personally met most of the people in this village. They are old, sick, and hungry, and those horsemen could return at any moment. Mattathios paused for a moment to think. This village is too big to defend. We need to pull back to a central location. Get everyone to the long hall in the center of the village and have them bring any weapons they can use or anything we can use to barricade. Leofric grimaced but nodded, turning and barking orders to all in earshot. Mattathios returned to Leostan's armory, or blacksmithery, to don his partially repaired armor and prepare for whatever came next.